Welcome to SaultSports.com. I'm Tony Boniferro, joined alongside Teddy Greenstein today. Teddy, how you doing?
Tony, I'm awesome, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm just going to talk a little bit about your new book here, The Quarterback Dads, and, obviously about the website, quarterbackdads.com. We're going to be posting links to all this on our website on SaultSports.com. So just for our viewers, Teddy's a longtime writer at the Chicago Tribune. He was, on the Big Ten Network quite a bit. He's currently the senior editor at PointsBet, an online sports book. So, Teddy, again, thanks so much for doing this. What I wanted to talk to you about before we kind of get into the book is obviously you grew up in New York. Kind of talk about you growing up in New York and how did you become a sports writer? Was this always something you kind of wanted to do, or how did you kind of fall into the field?
Yeah, Tony, the original plan was to play center field for the Yankees. And about the time of maybe my bar mitzvah, I realized that wasn't going to happen. So I started writing sports, high school paper, went to Northwestern University, journalism school out near Chicago, was back in New York a little bit at the New York Daily News and Sports Illustrated. And then the Chicago Tribune called in March of 1996 and said, "Do you want to cover Notre Dame football?" And at that point, Notre Dame really like the number one program in the country. I was 23 years old. Sure, why not? And yeah, led me to a 24-year career at the Chicago Trib, which was great. Except we all know what's been going on in the newspaper business. And I love the whole science of sports handicapping and talking about sports betting. Like, I'm the guy who was running our NFL pool in high school. So to get into the sports betting business was great for me.
So obviously leaving a major newspaper comes with some risks, right? Especially going into the sports betting market, and obviously it's flourishing now. But talk a little bit about that transition that you made and kind of how, did it go as smooth as you expected?
Yeah, honestly, man, I think the bigger risk would have been to stay. Like the Chicago Tribune, the Sunday used to be this thick, then this thick, then this thick, and now it's this thick. And the deadlines get earlier and, you get to go on fewer trips. So we've just seen what have happened to newspapers. The newspapers that have really good ownership still remain strong because, Americans and Canadians are so curious about news. They want to consume. They want great content. But the ones like the Tribune that have terrible ownership have just absolutely whittled away to almost nothing. Really sad. So contrast that with, online sports betting where the pie is growing and growing and growing. PointsBet recently got into Ontario. Hopefully we'll be in every spot in Canada before too long. So honestly, it was an easy decision. Haven't looked back. Absolutely love it. I mean, like when I go to a game now, when I go to a Cubs game, watch your beloved Cubs, I'm not slumped over a laptop. I'm taking VIPs. I'm taking clients. So that's the way to live.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I know. And as a Cubs fan, I can appreciate that, obviously. So let's get into this book. So obviously this book, Quarterback Dads, just tell us a little bit about the book and kind of why you decided to write about this topic.
Yeah. So Tony, I got a text message on July 4th of 2020 from an old friend who I went to Northwestern with. And he said, "Hey, my son is, training to be a high school quarterback. And he's got this trainer named Donovan Dooley. Donovan works in Detroit, and he's got all these stories of quarterback dads. And quarterback dads are basically the modern day stage moms. They're just obsessed. And the book gets into all the different ways in which they're obsessed. It starts with probably waking your kid up at 6 a.m. and putting spinach in his smoothie and knowing exactly how many Instagram followers not only he has, but the other players on the team have, and flying all around the country and firing quarterback trainers. And there's just so many different ways. So this friend said, Donovan is looking for a ghostwriter. Do you know anyone? I said, I do know somebody, me. Like at that point, I'm in my late 40s. I've not written a book. Football's my favorite sport. Quarterback's the most intriguing position. And on top of that, my two daughters play decently high level youth soccer. So I'm a soccer dad. So I thought it would be really fun to get into. And also, like, everybody always wants to know who's next, right? Whether it was when Tiger Woods was 2 years old on the Mike Douglas show, or a great hockey player or a great football player, who's going to be the next star they're going to be reading about or watching on TV in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, that's great. So obviously you talked a little bit about Donovan, right? And, Donovan obviously has had quite the impact in the state of Michigan on the quarterback market. What impact did he have on this book for you?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with him. And like the genesis of the book starts on a day where he is hearing all these dads kind of gripe about, oh, my kid should have been MVP, and how come my offensive coordinator is this, and my kid should be. And he just got sort of sick of it. So one day he hands out index cards to all of the young quarterbacks, and he says, guys, fill this out. Let me know what you would want your parents to know, but we'll keep it anonymous. And you've got these responses on index cards like, Mom, I had a chance to be the starter until you came along. Dad, my shoulder is killing me. If you only knew how much I hated it. Now, there are also positive comments, don't get me wrong. But honestly, the motivation for him to see a book done is to get dads to chill out, to dial it down a little bit, because quarterback dads, a lot of them have become too obsessed.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of quarterback specifically, obviously quarterback is arguably the toughest position in all of sports to play. I mean, you hear that argument all the time, right? Are QB dads, in your experience and kind of writing this book, do you kind of find that QB dads might be different from, say, running back dads or from lineman dads or from wide receiver dads? And do you notice that a difference there?
Radically different from, say, offensive or defensive lineman dads. At those positions on the football field, it's part of the team, right? I mean, an offensive line, you got 5 starters, sometimes 6 with a tight end. And if one guy screws up, they all look bad. So it's true teamwork there. And what's so also unique about the quarterback position is, Tony, is that only one can play. So even if you're a receiver dad and you really think your kid's hot stuff and all that, it's a different vibe, because sometimes teams are starting 4 and 5 wide receivers. Whereas with a quarterback, these dads are kind of like, my kid isn't starting as a freshman. Maybe we have to transfer. And, Penn State is only offering 1 kid this year. It's got to be my kid. It's just not like that for other positions. They're probably offering, they're trying to sign 4 linebackers. Yeah. So that's what makes the quarterback position so unique, and the fact that it's the most demanding as well mentally.
One thing that I found fascinating was it wasn't that you necessarily focused on new quarterbacks or old quarterbacks. You kind of talked to a whole variety of quarterback dads, in this book. So just, spanning back almost 30 years, of people that you've interviewed in this, how, in your opinion, how has being a quarterback kind of changed over the years? And has it become more pressure, a more pressure position, less pressure? Just what are your thoughts on that?
Tony, I think it just goes with technology. Like, one of the people I interviewed for the book is Tom Lemming. Tom Lemming works out of Schaumburg, Illinois, and he is sort of the godfather of football recruiting analysts. He even had a cameo in The Blind Side. So he was telling me that, back in the 80s, dads would be calling him constantly and sending videotapes of their kids. So you had obsessive quarterback dads then. But it's different now, because the quarterback training industry didn't really exist until maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So guys would just play for their high school team. Now, like, the summer is such a big deal. Like, what camp are you invited to? And then everything got accelerated also in terms of offers, where it used to be colleges are offering players, their junior year, sometimes their senior year. And now there's a kid here, Trey Taylor. He's a huge part of this book. He got offered by the University of Maryland recently. He's a 7th grader. Wow. And then when you add technology and social media and the capability of dads to video, to record every single moment of every single, practice and workout and game, so you can just see why they become so obsessed.
It's funny listening to you talk, right? Obviously, we're Canadian, right? And football is a huge deal up here. I don't think Americans fully understand how big of a deal football can be up here. But listening to you talk, I almost feel like you could replace the word football with hockey dads.
Absolutely.
In terms of up here, right? It's so similar. And one thing that you said, actually, I watched an interview that you did recently where you talked about the importance of kids playing more than one sport, right? Rather than focusing strictly on football or strictly on one sport. Can you kind of explain that a little bit and kind of why you think that's important?
Yeah, and one of the key figures in the book is J.J. McCarthy. He played a great role as a freshman quarterback last year in Ann Arbor, and he could be the starter at Michigan this year. And he loved hockey. He played ice hockey until he was 14. And then finally, it was just such a clash of schedules. Like, he couldn't do all the junior hockey he wanted to. He had to pick a sport. But, the smartest people in this book say not only should you play multiple sports, maybe run track, play baseball, play basketball. Like if you are going to play baseball, it's good if you're a pitcher because that builds arm strength, but it's actually better if you are a second baseman or shortstop. Because if you're a middle infielder, you got to get your footwork down and you got to make all these off angle throws that you're going to have to make as a quarterback now. So, go outside, play tag, run around, play capture the flag, do all those kind of stuff. Don't just throw a football for 300 days a year.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you've had a chance to interview some amazing football minds throughout this book. Who left the biggest impression on you? When you finished the interview and kind of finished the book, was there someone who really stood out to you almost unexpectedly?
Tony, like when I started out, my first two interview goals, I had two people I wanted to get. One was Todd Marinovich.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us of a certain age, we remember that when Todd Marinovich was a baby, his dad, Marv, determined that he was going to be a quarterback. And he had him teething on liver and he was stretching out his groins in the crib. And, he basically turned his son into a science project. So that was like the worst kind of quarterback dad. Although, to be fair, Todd made it to the NFL and had a great college career. But the other one was Archie Manning, because I think Archie in a lot of ways represents the best possible quarterback dad. And not only because his kids have been like wildly successful and we know about Peyton and Eli, but just how he tailored it to the different personalities of his kids. So the oldest one, Cooper, was like just a total comedian. And then Peyton, super intense. So he's the kid who is going to a Little League game and he's barking at all his teammates. You got to take extra infield practice and you got to take extra batting practice. And his dad is saying, would you relax? Some kids just want to show up.
Yeah.
And, Peyton is watching a film as a 10th grader and his dad is saying, could you go out and get a girlfriend? So he's holding him back. And then with Eli like barely said a word until he was 10 years old. So Archie had to go and like form a special bond with him so Eli could, break his shell a little bit. So I thought Archie was really, the ultimate here. And it's not one size fits all. You got to know your kid's personality.
That's awesome. One thing, that you talk about in the book, and I think this is super important to talk about, is you talk about the different types of quarterback dads, right? And I think you list 15 of them in total of the different types of quarterback dads. I don't want you to go through all of them because obviously we want people to read the book. But in your opinion, what's the one or two most productive type of quarterback dads, or helpful, I guess would be the better word, type of quarterback dads? And what are the most not destructive, but the ones that are, worse than the others?
Yeah. There are only three on the good side.
Okay,
and one is the coach dad. And he's the one who, even though he really knows the game, Pep Hamilton is the example I use. Pep Hamilton has been a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator at numerous big-time colleges and in the NFL. Pep is not there coaching his kid Jackson day to day. Pep trusts the quarterback trainers to do the bulk of the work day to day. Because look, Pep has a full-time job; he's busy, so it's smart. He's a coach dad who also hands his kid off. Also, the helpful dad we talk about. The helpful dad is the one who shows up to the workout, says, "Hey, coach, need me to film anything? Guys need any water?" But just sits there and observes. And then when the workout's over, it's a fist bump. Let's go in the car. Let's get some ice cream. And then, of the 12 negative dads, a couple that I think are almost on the more humorous side is like, one is the we dad. And the we dad, is always saying, yeah, we're looking at the University of Michigan, but, we're also considering SEC schools. And, we might have to transfer if we don't start. It's like, dude, it's not we. Okay. Yeah. And then the reminiscer dad who thinks like he would have been a high school All-American if not for, a knee injury. So you just don't want to have all these dads who are basically helicopter dads who are still like hovering over their kids and just won't let them have some independence.
So before we talk about the Viotto family, who you kind of, who you talk about in the book, one question I really wanted to ask you was, one thing, there was a quote on your website from Carl Williams, whose son plays at USC now. And he said, when a kid decides he has a dream and is willing to work for it, you turn over whatever resources you have. Honestly, it doesn't matter if you have to refinance or take out a second mortgage. If you want uncommon results, you have to do uncommon things. That's a great quote. However, my question is, it kind of seems like the amount of resources required to be a successful quarterback aren't feasible for kind of everyone, right?
Yeah.
There's a stigma out there that it's not necessarily about fairness. It's almost like a pay to play, right? You have to go to these camps. You have to pay for the extra coaching. You have to pay for the media, that type of stuff. What would you say to people that say, like, hey, listen, my son's a great quarterback, but financially, I can't afford it. How can they be successful?
I'd say a few things. I mean, one, you should consider playing another position just because quarterback is so specialized and your kid might fall behind. But if he's determined to be a quarterback, we have an example in the book of Peyton Ramsey, who ended up being a great Big Ten quarterback at Indiana and Northwestern, and he's never gone to a trainer. Now, his dad is a very successful high school coach in Cincinnati, so he was still around football. He was going to practices. So it's not 100% necessary, but you will fall behind. I don't think you're going to start as a freshman or sophomore in college if you don't have some kind of a training. In terms of the finances, I know this, Donovan Dooley makes an effort to work with families. So if he thinks there's promise there, I think he's probably going to adjust his rates to help out the families.
That's great. So you talked about the Viotto family, obviously, in the book, and just kind of talk about your experience with them, kind of how the interview went, and kind of their story a little bit.
Yeah, really, it makes me smile to think about Ross and Drew. So about this time last year, we went out to Kurt Warner's compound in Arizona. And Kurt Warner doesn't live in a house. He lives in a resort. He's got a 50-yard football field in the back. It's kind of what you'd hope for a Super Bowl MVP and, wildly successful guy. His movie came out a couple months ago. Yeah. So met Ross. And as somebody who's all of my in-laws are Canadian, are all Torontonians, I was especially interested to chat with him because he's from your area. I don't have to tell you. And he's just such a big teddy bear, warm guy. And, his story is one of sacrifice. He's the sacrificing quarterback dad because, he was basically willing to split up his family and say, Drew, you and I have to get to Detroit. You and I have to get to Michigan to get this training with Donovan Dooley if we're going to be serious about this. And it's paid off with college scholarships. So super warm-hearted guy. He was talking about how as a Canadian, he's watching Ohio State, Michigan, and nobody else is. And then he actually played football at Carleton College. And for a while they were doing 700-mile round trip, commutes just to get good quarterback training. And then he made the ultimate plunge and moved to the States. And it's safe to say he does not regret it.
Yeah, it's funny. Ross was my high school football coach, actually. That's how I first met Ross. And then I had the pleasure of coaching Drew when he was in grade 8. And I remember during that time, they were talking about making that transition. And there was a lot of, it took a lot of guts for them to do it. And I was really impressed that they did it. And it's nice. Obviously, Teddy, with this, there's going to be people that see this and think to themselves, hey, you know what? Could you call this book Soccer Dads? Could you call this book Pitching Dads? Could you call this book like Hockey Dads, like we talked about? What makes quarterback dads so unique? You kind of talked a little bit about it, but what's the main difference that you see between other sports and quarterback dads?
Tony, I would say, first of all, like if you are a dad or mom of an athlete playing any of the sports you mentioned, or swimming or lacrosse or golf, there's stuff in here for you because like you're always wondering, should I be the one motivating my kid? Should my kid be the motivator? Should I coach my kid? What are the tips involved here to have like a good, healthy relationship? So there's a lot of stuff in there about that. But quarterback, it's just a unique position. Yeah. Really, because there's only one on the field and because it's just so cutthroat. And like, there's so many that don't make it, but then the ones that do are billionaires. I mean, it's just such a, you can be at the top of the profession or you can flame out. I mean, they're 5-star recruits that don't even make it as a college football player. And why? Maybe they didn't work hard enough. Maybe they got unlucky with injuries, but it's a fascinating position because, you put a great quarterback on a 500 team, it can be a championship team. And if you put, a bad quarterback on an otherwise championship team, it's going to be a 500 team. And there's just no other position that influence wins and losses so much. And that's part of why these dads become so obsessive.
So this was obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this was your first book, correct?
That is, yes.
So obviously with the success of this, do you have any? What's your next project, or what's your next goal? Do you have? You must have something else that you're kind of looking at doing.
Well, I was with Donovan not long ago, and he shows me his phone, and it's a text message, and it says, "Hey, why did the coach pull my kid? He needs some stats." And Donovan points to it and says, "That was from a mom."
Wow.
So
Okay.
I think football moms might be the next project here.
Oh, that's awesome. Teddy, listen, I really appreciate you taking some time to do this with us. Obviously, you know, having the Viottos in the story is, or in the book story is, you know, we're pretty proud of that, being from up here, a little Northern Ontario town, and you know what the Viottos have done is inspiring to a lot of people. So we really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us today. We really appreciate you adding them into the story. And we wish you nothing but the best of luck going forward. And we're going to be posting links to your website. And so if anyone's interested in buying the book, they can get it on there. And really, really appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. I would just caution that unfortunately, they're not always shipping to Canada from QBDads.com. I think they will make exceptions. I am personally sending an order to my Uncle Dave and brother-in-law Craig on some of this stuff. So if it says that they're not shipping to Canada, you can always order it through Amazon. Yeah. But QB Dads is the best place, you know, certainly to buy merch, and hopefully they'll be making exceptions and shipping up to you guys.
That's great, and go Cubs! Maybe we'll hook up at a game at Wrigley this year.
That would be awesome, man. I'm in walking distance. Give me a holler.
I will. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate this. Eh?
Thanks, Tony. Loved it.